To go to Hollywood, California. There's a major labor action going on down there. Two critical unions are on strike at the same time, as you're aware. The Writers Guild of America and the AFTRA-SAG union, the union that is involved with performers, on-camera people. I want to talk about how long this might last, the ripple effect in the world of Hollywood, and I want to talk about it with a guy who just knows the territory so very well. How about it for Sam Rubin? Thank you, Sam, for joining us.
Mark, happy to. The word that we have been bandying about for the last several days is duration. And the concern is, is this sort of a summer of labor woes, or does it extend to the fall or beyond? No less than Barry Diller, who you and I both worked for when he helped to create the Fox network. And then, of course, prior to that, running Paramount Pictures. He says that if this extends past September, it is, quote, disaster. So I think for many out of work, it's disaster right now. The writers have been on strike for 11 weeks. The actors have been on strike for 5 days. The actor strike in 5 days getting more attention than the writer's strike in 11 weeks has received. But we'll see what happens. But it makes me very nervous. Our physical TV station is in the same facility as Netflix. So we have strikers walking the picket lines every single day. And in the most visceral way, I know that picketing is important and sends this symbol and, generates a lot of attention. But these people are just walking in circles. And I wonder if there's some better manifestation of use of their human power. And, the thought I had at the top of my head is, the Screen Actors Guild should team up with Habitat for Humanity, and they could build a house a day as opposed to walking in circles around Disney.
I mean, it is sort of this is an interesting point. By the way, I haven't heard it made by anyone else, which is that there's sort of an old school quality to the way this labor statement is being made. The picketing, and usually the picketing involves picketing in places where the public comes or where there are other people who are forced to make that decision as to whether or not they want to, quote, cross that picket line. In this case, I don't know that you saw what happened at Universal. I don't know that you're getting that same effect as what we're going to say. You saw what happened at Universal too, where they're tearing up the pavement where they usually picket, where they usually walk.
Yeah, it's really Universal accused of two things: A, tearing up the pavement, and yesterday it's very hot in Southern California as it is elsewhere. They trimmed all the trees, so the picketers were on a shady sidewalk, and now those trees are bare. So some say that was sort of a dirty trick. And Universal says, that was completely unintentional.
Does it reflect? I know it's a weird thing, but do those superficial things, the kind of dirty tricks of it all, reflect the disposition of the studio?
I tell you what, this is very personal. It's extremely personal. And one thing that I think Fran Drescher has done very effectively is, and you and I both have probably been in this circumstance where we're asking an employer for a raise and they're like, oh, there's no money. And it's like, well, look at the car you're driving. I think there's lots of money, that kind of thing. And then you figure it out. And then, you were friends before and are hopefully friends again. I'm going to speak for her, but I think her reaction is, look how much money I, as the star of The Nanny, have made for the collective you. And I was well rewarded for The Nanny, and she refers to it as a gravy train, and everybody on that show was well rewarded, and it was great for us, and it was great for you. And now you've changed the business model where there are no nannies anymore. There's no sitcoms that do 22 to 26 episodes a year that run for 10 years. And so for people watching or listening, if you think of this as the widget business, an actor or a writer gets paid on production. How many widgets do they make? The widgets being episodes of television. So, everybody likes NCIS. There are hundreds of episodes of NCIS. Did you like The Diplomat on Netflix? There were 8 episodes. And, maybe for the whole life of the show, there'll be 24 over multiple years. So they're making far fewer widgets. And in a phrase in my conversations with stars prior to the strike, is on the right hand, there's more work than there's ever been. And on the left hand, it pays less than it ever has. And what people say is you need 3 jobs to make the money you made 5 or 10 years ago with 1 job.
I saw this, Sam, in the comments. Here it is from Barry Joe Jim Bob. How many millionaire actors are walking the picket lines for anything other than the photo shoot? In regard to the specific question, we can address it, but I'm more concerned with what that question suggests about the public's attitude, which is, Hollywood actors, they're all millionaires, the writers do well. What's the big deal? So you're taking a little less money, it's a new environment, and everybody's taking less money. Could you speak to, A, the photo op thing, and also sort of the bigger question?
All right. For example, since this picket has began, Dermot Mulroney, who is a working actor, who probably has a better living, certainly than most actors and likely than most Americans, has walked the picket line every day and doesn't want the cameras because he's concerned that people are going to read this as a disingenuous thing. And he's not disingenuous. He's deeply sincere. I don't think we've seen the Rock hasn't been on the picket line. We haven't seen these sort of $20 million actors. And the vast majority of members of both of the Screen Actors Guild, especially 160,000 members, 95% do not work. They don't work as actors. You're seeing a lot of those people on the picket line. And the thought might be, well, they're not doing anything anyway. And then you are definitely seeing faces that whether you know them by name. Rachel McAdam yesterday here in Hollywood, Kristen Wiig in Culver City, people who have enough money to ride this out. But I think, and I sometimes think this word is overused, but actors view this as an existential threat to their way of life. Because one thing, I hate bringing you and I into this, but I will. You've had the experience with different shows, and I've had the experience over the years with different shows and different movies. It's called mailbox money, residuals. So I'll do a movie 20 years ago, and I'm still getting checks for it. The checks now are very small. But the way streaming works is they will pay you a little more the first time, and then there's no residuals. So, for example, Mandy Moore from This Is Us made a fortune on NBC and on reruns on NBC. The show now streams. Mandy Moore, the lead actress in This Is Us, shows a check, I think, for 86 cents. So a major source of income was this residual, this rerun money. And now that the reruns have migrated from broadcast TV, where it was already pre-negotiated what the rates were, to streaming, and streaming runs unlimited, the money has collapsed. And then the other thing, and this to me is just an interesting 2020, the phrase information is power. So you're a weatherman at Cron in San Francisco, you're a weatherman at Fox 11 in LA, and you can go to the front office with a rating sheet and say, look, we both know how the show's doing. Doing well, I should be rewarded. Gee, it's not doing so well, maybe I'll be more flexible. But you have agreed data. You both agree, here's how the 10 o'clock news is doing. With streaming, Netflix has absolute pinpoint data, unbelievable information. They will not share any of it. They say that's a non-starter. So the metric of success, you could be in a streaming show and nobody's watching, everybody's watching. You really don't know, and they don't tell you. And prior to the strike, I've heard this time and time again. The good thing about the streamers is the check clears and they don't have many notes. But the bad thing, Gabriel Iglesias, the Fluffy, the heavyset comic,
Sure,
who had a long-running series on Netflix, said they never spoke to him once. He never learned how it was doing. He had no idea if it was successful or not. So that's weird.
and this is important because Fran Drescher made this point, but it's clearly something that, as you might imagine, let us share in the profits a bit. Let us share in the success. If we bring you success, if we don't bring success, then we don't want to share. But the question as to how successful something is, you're saying, is completely cloaked in darkness. There is none of that information released.
It's not. None of that information is shared. It's not that they don't have it. They have it in a more detailed and granular way than broadcast TV ever had.
Sure, they can tell you where people are watching exactly.
The kind of people and how long, and every other sort of intimate detail. So I think that would be frustrating. And you've heard story after story after story, and the unions are aligning themselves with UPS workers and a variety of other laborers. And I do think somebody watching is like, well, gee, that's glamorous. It's all limousines. But both you and I have been on sets, and it's work. It is
Yeah.
actually a lot of work. It's not digging ditches. It's not hard manual labor, but it is work. And a phrase I've always said, it is 100 times harder to get the job than to do the job. Imagine that you're in some field where even if you're successful, 90% of the time you hear no. We'd rather have somebody else. And so, it's
I mean, that's exactly right. Sadly, it's a pyramid. So the number of people who can really make a living off of it, that number is less than the number of people who are involved and trying to make a living at it. As you've said, many of them out of work. Here's an off point, but nonetheless, I want to get to before we forget. Luis says, Sammy, when are you and KTLA coming back to DirecTV? I miss you guys. Please become a regular on this show. Yes, that would be nice. Sam has made himself available on this show. When are you coming?
Only if I can get a jacket and a tote bag.
Yes, I will give you some merch. Go ahead.
But okay, so this is a perfectly good example. And this is the weird machinations. The parent company of KTLA is a company called Nexstar. They own over 200 TV stations. And they're fighting with DirecTV over how much DirecTV should pay them for the retransmission right of their TV stations. And they'll fight likely for X amount of time. And when the fall rolls around and NFL football rolls around, DirecTV will want these stations back on the air at whatever cost, because people will quit DirecTV if they can't get football. That's the most galvanizing thing. So at the moment, guys like Lewis are upset that we're not available on DirecTV. There's other alternatives, which I'll get into in just a second. And my dilemma is, I'll go to my boss. Oh, our show's great. It's number one. Isn't it amazing? Well, it seems to slip a little bit. It's like, well, it slipped a little bit because the parent company has taken us off of, a big service. It's not our fault. We have nothing to do with it. So, it's that kind of head-splitting stuff. But KTLA and many, many other stations are doing this now. We don't want to be beholden to DirecTV or Spectrum Cable. So in the case of KTLA, we have a website, ktla.com. You can watch all the newscasts there. We have an app, the KTLA Plus app. You can watch the newscasts there. You could get an old-fashioned antenna and watch it over the air in Southern California. So there are ways to still get it, but I know it is inconvenient. And to be honest, I've heard from many more than Louis. I didn't know that many people got DirecTV, but apparently they do.
Yeah, well, DirecTV used to be the go-to when they had the NFL package, as you suggest. Right. NFL really does sort of lead the way. But then now that the NFL is available in other places, you're right, it's sort of spread out. And people have YouTube TV and other things. Quickly, before we lose Sam Rubin, Sammy, with streaming being the thing, how do actors get paid who live on the residuals? Sam's point, the Lady Beatrice, is that there aren't residuals, that once it goes up on a streaming platform, that you get paid the one-time check. It's like a buyout. You'll never know how many times that series was watched. And as a result, there are no residuals. That was the old model. Now they're asking for a sort of profit participation in the new model. So in our last minute or two, Sam, I ask you then, sort of to the Lady Beatrice's question, what do you think will happen? Because the AFTRA SAG people have suggested, hey, we'll have an independent data company to deal with just telling us the basic numbers without having to look too far into your business. And those basic numbers will be used to compensate actors in the same way that you used to pay residuals. Will some version of that ever happen, or is that generally right? Or what do they want?
At the moment, the streamers are saying it is a non-starter. I like that the Lady Beatrice is named the Lady Beatrice. So a couple things to unpack with what we've just described. So let's say, and we'll just use it, the Kerry Russell show, The Diplomat. Let's say that this independent body, there's a company called Parrot Analytics that SAG has suggested. And let's say Parrot Analytics says that The Diplomat is moderately successful. And that then SAG has a formula, people from the show would get paid extra from this pool. And then Netflix secretly knows with their own superior data, you know what? The show's not successful at all. Or you know what? The show is insanely successful, 10 times more successful than they're letting on. So I think that's a weird kind of data battle that may be worked out. What SAG wants, and this to me does not sound like an over ask, they want a pool of 2% of, I think, all subscriber fees, which would be a substantial amount of money, but it's 2%. Netflix keeps the 98 other percent. And so that 2% goes into a pool, and then there's some sort of mathematical formula. I don't know what that is. That the Diplomat in success, people get this, and I'll pick out another show, Barbecue, Backyard Barbecue, not in success, they don't get that. What I think is really missing here is, and this is old Hollywood versus new Hollywood. One thing that people points out is, the great Goldwyn and Lou Wasserman, all these, legendary people were creators. They were producers. These guys are all accountants. So David Zaslav has never written anything. He's an accountant. And so they don't have the same gut for it. And there doesn't seem to be this affection between Bob Iger, very off-putting. They're a little unrealistic. Well, Bob Iger makes $78,000 a day. That's pretty unrealistic.
That's a great point. I never even, to be honest, I mean, clearly the downsizing, I see it all as a function of mega mergers that have, essentially make everything just a line item and everything else, so they can afford a long strike because they're just not in that business solely, But that's a great point about them not being creators either. I know I got to let you go, but you please just give me a second on AI, because that's massive, and it's massive to both unions.
Yes, and a shout out, as it were, of all people, Justine Bateman. Brother Jason Bateman, we all know. Justine, many of us remember from Family Ties with Michael J. Fox. Justine Bateman is the Paul Revere of AI. She has been screaming louder and longer and more effectively than anybody. And she is like, this is doomed. This is worse than you think, and everybody better pay attention. So AI, artificial intelligence, and the ability, Mark, that a computer apparently could record the segment that we have had. Based on this segment, they would have the ability to synthesize either of our voices, so they could get some computer to sound as good as you sound forevermore. And the technology is in its infancy, but is already amazing. So what the studios offered, they called an unprecedented deal, was, hey, come in, you're an extra, you're a background actor. We'll pay you for the day. We'll scan you, and then we'll own your image in perpetuity. And the studio's like, and we'll pay you. And the actors are like, that is the worst offer ever. Who'd want that? It's terrible. So some sort of language of AI protection. The Directors Guild, and I'm paraphrasing, we recognize that each of these jobs are to be performed by a person, and a person is a human being. And so that presumably gave the directors a degree of comfort that bots won't start directing shows, that they're protected. So what is the language, and I don't know what that language is, that would make actors feel comfortable? And actors are not saying, hey, look, we want to ban AI. They recognize, that we want to ban electric cars. They're not anti-future, but they need to be and want to be and expect to be protected in some fashion. What that fashion is, I don't know.
Feels like there's a gulf between where they are now and where they want to be.
I like this phrase from John. He says, the end is knowable. That, in other words, and I've used this very simplistic answer, the producers are offering $5 an hour. The actors want $10 an hour. Well, they're going to settle at $8. Everybody knows they're going to settle at $8. It's just when the studios decide to settle at $8. And that there's a big argument there that the studios in the short term, they're not paying out any money to any of these people. So maybe it's better for them. Netflix actually reports their earnings at the end of the day today. And it's
that's interesting.
This quarter, that likely won't.
Let me be clear on the point you're making, though. You're saying, but in the example you just gave, you know where you're going to end up. In this case, you don't know where you're going to end up. Is that the point you were making? Did I understand?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that uncertainty, there are like 25 issues.
I see.
So I think on money, on minimums, they know where they're going to end up. So I think 10 of these, they already know the answer. And then on some of them, they don't. And again, one other thing, which I'm not a labor expert by any means, they're mad at each other. They're pissed. And the actors feel most especially that they gave the producers an extension, a 12-day extension to sort this out. And they feel they were duped. They feel that the producers wanted to extend to give the cast of Barbie and the cast of Oppenheimer more time to promote the movie.
Wow.
And they feel that those 12 days, and they say this with upset and anger, were wasted, that they sat in a room waiting for the producers to come in. Hey, we've studied your proposal and we want this. They didn't. They really are mad about that. They're really mad about that.
I'd love to continue this another time. And I mean, just check in on this. How do you handicap it, Sam? When will it end?
Okay. I think July is a wash. I think August is a wash. I kind of agree with Barry Diller that it has to settle in September. The Emmy date is September 18th. That date is going to be pushed. But if you and I are having this conversation at the end of September, an enormous amount of people have experienced huge financial pain, and it's going to be a real problem.
He can be found on the KTLA Morning News. And he does international stuff too. You're great, Sam, and great perspectives. Really a great segment. Thank you, Sam Rubin, everybody. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, Sammy. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.